She led me up Decatur Street, past the old buildings housing shops below and apartments above. The noise wasn't as bad along that street, and fewer people were around. I started to relax, my mind not clamoring quite so much. We crossed the streetcar stop behind Jack's Brewery and rode to Elysian Fields near the cemetery. Getting off, she walked me several blocks to the cemetery, and we entered through the front gate. I had seen above-ground graves before, but nothing like what was here. It was like a small city with tiny houses to me. She took me to the St. Roch Chapel first to say a prayer for the dead and for those who were sick or crippled, and to see what was inside. As I looked inside, my mind couldn't understand what I saw. Limbs and body parts were everywhere, hanging from the ceiling and laying on ledges. Strange metal contraptions hung all over, looking like torture devices. Screaming, I broke out of my grandmother's hold and ran. I ran through the cemetery, weaving past crypts of all kinds. My mind wasn't making much sense of my surroundings. It seemed to be on autopilot, leading me farther from the hanging horror show of the chapel. I could hear nothing but silence. No cars, no voices, no birds calling from the trees around the cemetery. I felt like time had frozen. I slowed to a walk, catching my breath. I didn't see or hear my grandmother anywhere. There were just tombs all around me. I saw a space between two that looked like a good hiding place for an 8-year-old lost in a vast city. I crawled into it, scraping my knees and hands on rocks, sticks, and debris that had blown between the two tombs. I went halfway back, with an equal distance between the ends, in case I needed to flee. It was darker than it should have been in broad daylight, but my child's mind only thought about how that darkness hid me from prying eyes. I don't know how long I sat between those two crypts, but my crying had stopped, and my tears had dried on my cheeks. It was warm, and I think I dozed off for a bit. What woke me was a hand on my shoulder. Startling awake, I saw a little girl around my age. Her hand was on my shoulder, and she looked at me sadly. I said hello to her, but she didn't reply. She just looked at me, through me. She was wearing an old-fashioned dress and ankle boot-type shoes. One of her legs was twisted at an odd angle. When she was sure I was watching her, she stood up and walked off, looking over her shoulder like she wanted me to follow her. I crawled out between the tombs and dusted myself free of debris, setting off after her. She passed through the cemetery, walking through crypts as if she were made of air. I knew I shouldn't follow her. Every time I followed someone different like her, it ended with me getting in trouble. I followed her anyway. She took me back to the chapel with all the hanging body parts. There were more people there, young, old, middle-aged, and all of them looked at me with beseeching eyes. I could hear voices all around me, whispers, slowly building in volume until it became a sound like wind blowing hard in my ears. I wrapped my arms around my head and fell to the ground, crying for it to stop. I don't know how long it went on. The next thing I knew, my grandmother was shaking me, screaming at me for running off. I tried to tell her the people wouldn't shut up. Could she please ask them to shut up? She said there were no people there. Was I crazy or sick?